It's after Mike.
Yeah, what were they?
You drew the short straw there?
What were they thinking?
No, let me show you real quick. Yeah, that's.
Carol, there's a spot with your name right there.
That's me. Great.
Looks like I'm the only one that signed this.
Oh.
I'll be close in spirit.
Yeah.
At every cheese.
Just join her.
They're here watching Sarah's out of town.
No, this is the best thing.
Came right out, didn't it?
She's here. She's starting.
It's either that or throw popcorn.
I was debating running for some tea. but
Okay.
I will not. I'll get it.
You can still go.
Hi,
Thank you. I found my space.
you did, one of your buddies.
Okay, good afternoon. We good?
Thank you.
We're good.
Okay. So let's get started with the work session. It's September 10th, 2025. Time is a little past 4 p.m. Attendance, I think I have all 7 board members here in person, including our newest board member, Ms. Amanda Huber. So thanks for joining us. Superintendent Gall is here along with several of his district administrative team. Also want to welcome all the principals who are joining us and who are in the audience listening to this discussion that is taking place. Today, we are starting with an in-depth look at the CMAS, which is the state test results. This is going back, looking into the results from April, May, when I think April is when students took this test, and we've been getting the results back in August, and now we have the entire information available for the public as well. The presentation, as you look at the presentation and you had an opportunity to look at talking to the board, is divided into 3 sections out there. And at the recent board retreat, we discussed about the need for efficient presentations and also board questions. So at the end of each section, the 3 sections, you will have opportunities to ask questions. So hold your questions until the presentation for that section is complete, and then we'll open it up for questions. And if you can please prioritize your questions and bring 2 questions to the table and discussion. At this time, I'm talking about individual board members. Each of you prioritize 2 questions so that we can move forward efficiently and in alignment with the board request to keep things tight and on time. If you have several follow-up questions, you certainly can follow up directly with Superintendent Gall after this meeting, and he can answer those questions or direct you to appropriate district personnel who can answer some of the other questions that you have. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Gall to set the context for this presentation. And Superintendent Gall, over to you.
I think we did it. I think we outnumbered the board at the table here with administrators. So I appreciate all my administrators, the immense amount of work that's gone into this briefing as an extension of what we shared with you last week on some of our deeper academic strategies. I would be remiss if I didn't start with my great concern for our country, as I know that several students were killed today in Evergreen at a high school shooting. And that there was also a semi-political media figure that was assassinated today for expressing their opinion. My concern is particularly as our district enters into a new season that we haven't felt for over 50 years, of where people feel that extreme measures are needed to express their opinion, that we remember that we are here for students, we are always here for students, and that we not allow this to get into a space where people are fearful for their safety. I appreciate Mr. Allison over there in the corner. He is on extremely high watch We have to get back to a place where teaching and learning is central to what a school district does, that every employee and every asset of the community demands nothing better than strong teaching and learning. This is what we are accountable, and we will brief for you here today. But please, our hearts and our prayers and our thoughts to anybody who is feeling that level of stress that that act of violence is their solution. Here's our agenda. We're going to try and keep time on this. I'm probably the most egregious use of this. I was only 3 minutes off on the board meeting, so I am trying to speed up my talk, and I'll make sure that I get us there. But we will ask for Q&A at the end of each one of these sections. That doesn't mean you can't ask a question at the end that happened earlier. But what we want to avoid is a question about something that might come later in the brief, and we hope for a robust conversation with the board. Our bottom line up front, we did not perform at the level that I hoped that the district would perform, but we are still up as a district for both math and ELA. What I'm most excited about is the spaces where we piloted our work, particularly on coaching, on agency, and developing our curricular resources. We saw significant gains, marked gains, to be able to sit here and tell you that last year's 3 schools of most concern, Mitchell and Galileo and Adams, have seen upward movement very consistently in response to those strategies. And even more specifically, by individual classroom, of which we have the data now, our teachers that invested in the use of the resources and in the professional development provided by the district in response to the needs of their students, I'll put the bottom line up front, outperformed their control group by 2 to 1. So it's super exciting to see that we know that the strategies are working, but yet there is still great work to do to return the entirety of this district to excellence that we have promised all of our community and committees. And we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on background now. We only do this once a year, but I want everybody to understand the differences between growth and achievement, where these things are measured. If you're familiar with this, then please, there won't be any questions from you. But every time we brief this, we don't want to have to start over again. So we want to give you all a strong foundation as we get through the slides in the actual data. So handing it over to Dr. Colicky.
Just a quick reminder, so the school performance framework, so the SPF, is generated for each school. That's their overall report card for state assessment results. And then there is a district performance framework, a DPF, which we'll talk about at a later point in a later meeting. But the big thing to take away from the SPF, school performance framework, is how it's calculated. So it's school at elementary and middle. It's basically a 60-40 split between 60% is growth, 40% is achievement. At the high school, its post-workforce readiness aspects are added on. That's what we call page 3 in our vernacular. So it's kind of the SAT score, graduation, dropout, and so on. So when we look at academic growth constituting 60%, it's worthwhile to understand really how this works, because it is a year-to-year measure. So it's a bit delayed. And so what we're looking at is on that table right there to the right, you can see that when we're looking at 4th grade students, we are looking at a grade 3 score from last year compared to a grade 4 score to this year. So that's going to have a few ramifications. 1, it is across the year. 2, there is no growth for grade 3, because grade 3 is the first year they take a test. So we'll see how that impacts, especially our smaller schools, in just a moment. And then you can see how it goes down throughout that whole list. And then 9th grade, there is no growth for EBRW, evidence-based reading and writing, between 8th and 9th grade. So 9th grade only has a growth score from math. So that's another pressure point. Not as much, because our high schools are larger and they can absorb some of that, but it's still something to keep in mind. So when we look at it, if you look at that last bullet, that's really the takeaway. You'll hear terminology around a student growth percentile, an SGP, and a median growth percentile, an MGP. The student growth percentile is the comparison of the student to a bucket of like students last year to this year. How did that grouping of students change? Each student then gets a growth percentile. That's their student growth percentile. Those get pooled at the school level. We could do it actually at the grade level, at the school level, ultimately at the district level. That pooling, they take the median, the middle point of that distribution, and that becomes our MGP, okay? So when that becomes 60% of the score, we take that into mind, but it also comes with some real caveats that we want to be very cognizant of that we'll look at in just a minute. Academic achievement is really around percent passing, and that's where we talk about grow the head, shrink the tail. We want the green to get bigger, we want the red to get smaller. That's the academic achievement side. So then when we just really quickly look at how this kind of plays out, if you're looking at the MGP by school, you might see school A, where notice the reference point being our little orange student there. At school A, they moved up one place in the percentile line. The percentile line being 1 to 99. Mr. Orange moved up one spot. At school B, the same match or the matched student based on previous performance moved back one place. That's going to have negative impacts at school B's growth percentile, and then positive impacts at school A. And then the 50th percentile is just our normal distribution, our bell curve. 50th is right in the middle. So if you are at the 50th, you are right in the middle of the distribution. Half the state grew faster than you, half the state grew slower than you. That's why we talk about 50 is just, man, maybe keeping pace, right? Because what we saw with the state is that the state actually moved a little bit faster than expected. So a 50 is still going to be outpaced. So we're looking at, we set goals around 55 to 60 MGP for a school. And we're looking at down to this teacher level to say that if you are below a 40 MGP, that means the distribution is passing you up and you are indeed, your class is falling behind. And that's based on that distribution. So just as we look at that then, looking at you probably read over a statewide context, Pia, we had really pretty, no major declines in CMAS, and actually the growth across the state accelerated, which is reflected in some of our lower district numbers because we stayed flat. The state accelerated to a large degree. So mostly comparable across ELA, gains in grades 4 through 8, rising trends. We saw those same trends, just not at the slope that the state saw. PSAT, SAT saw gains, and we saw that same thing within our data. PSAT, it was mixed. It was relatively flat over the whole thing. We continue to struggle across the state, students with IEPs and multilingual learners. We'll speak specifically to that in our context. And then it's kind of, you can see where our free reduced lunch, FRL, and race ethnicity played out. These are all the subcategories that we get points for on the school performance framework. So we really want to take a look at that. We'll take a deeper dive in just a minute. So now when we take a look at, here's a case study of some typical SPFs, school performance frameworks that we see. The first one is what I'm calling an achievement gap. That we have all schools represented above here are struggling with grade level proficiency, showing that we have this real mixture of all red going from left to a mixture of a little bit of green popping into the system to the right. Green meaning it mixed. That is a grade. That's the median where the students are at grade level for the most part. So we have this gap across much of our system, where the top half is red. And then we get what I'm calling growth masking, where we might get some green and some yellow, and the bottom half looks pretty good, and the top half is red. This is not an ideal situation because even though it might result, it probably will result actually, in a performance categorization overall, we still have no subcategory. We have truly had situations where we have no subcategories in the green. It's maybe a couple of approaching, meaning we have no categories that are meeting grade level work, but we get green growth, and so then we get a performance. We are really tackling that question. We want growth to be a result of good work. We are not setting our goals around growth. We're using growth to measure how do we get resources to the right people in the right places in the quickest cycle possible. But all of our goals are around changing that all red to yellow and ultimately all green. We also get a lot of small school volatility, which is what I was just talking about. So if you take a look at the SPF to the right, you notice several subcategories are missing. And that's because no calculation will happen for a sample smaller than 16. for statistical reasons and also for personally identifiable information. So if you don't have if you don't have enough students in those categories, it impacts the top, but take a look at the bottom, because now you're missing growth from one year to the next. And you have growth being calculated on one or two groups, maybe even one teacher in our smallest situations. So it's not an excuse. It's not a reason for inaction or action. It is a fact that we then build into our strategy and our moves, our next moves. So you can see that the implications there are pretty strong that we need to really keep in mind as we work with those smaller schools. So now this distribution is what I call basically another way of looking at how growth and how achievement play out. So what you're looking at here are two distributions. These are both for CMAS Elementary and then middle school to the right, and they're both for ELA. If you look at, it kind of looks like our little logo on the coin a little bit, right? So, but we have the distribution to the right, the dark blue being this would be a high performing school. This same relationship can happen within a school. This would be our group of high performing students, right? But we have the high performing school, the lighter blue to the left is a lower performing school. In the middle is where that lands us as a district. If these were groups of students, that's where that would land the school. So you can see that pretty clearly that we rely on that darker grouping of students to really bolster our overall distribution and mean and percent passing. So the passing level is the dotted line in the middle, right at 750 being our passing. So the dotted line is actually kind of the mean. It's the mean for the whole distribution. 750 is the passing level though. So we see the top performing elementary school with a strong distribution, and then that bottom bringing it down, depressing the overall distribution. So we have a bolstering effect by having that strong upper end. This has ramifications in both making sure we're growing the top. It also has ramifications in marketing our product to families who have the ability and the desire to move around and find the best setting and the best fit for their students. We have to be very cognizant that we are not losing, in that case, population from that either end for that matter, being cognizant at upper. When we look at this within math, so now we have both middle school and elementary math. We can see it in a more profound way. We're on the right. At middle school math, our percent passing is more depressed, bringing our entire distribution down. So the distribution at the top school are lower than the bottom, and because the top school is not outperforming it, then we get the entire system being depressed and coming down a little bit. Have to get both. Investing in bringing up the bottom, shrinking the bottom, getting that light blue distribution smaller, growing the top, getting the dark blue distribution taller.
Is this last year to this year? Is that kind of your two pictures?
No, this is this year comparing two different schools.
Okay, thank you.
Which is perfect, because the next slide is questions.
Sorry.
No, that was great.
Are we good?
Yeah, just to frame, I really asked David, if you send the clicker on back, to frame particularly on the SPF one, on the challenges of what we call performance by growth in a small school's portfolio. I love to celebrate our small schools. I think the way that this district creates a different narrative in the region is as you walk into 99% of our elementary schools, and as a principal, you can literally know every child by name. I think that's an advantage, but I'm gonna tell you, not as an excuse, just as a statement of fact, the end size of what it takes for a small classroom to qualify for that test to be counted means that we have many of our schools where a single teacher or one of two teachers at a grade band is what makes the difference of whether or not that school is performance improvement or priority improvement. Now, that's a great opportunity to make sure that we're delivering on that. And this is the first year in execution that we have that by classroom data, not just at mid-year and end of year by STAR, but through a series of implementation metrics that you'll see through the course of this brief and you heard last week. That means that we will put resources in immediately to not leave this bimodal distribution to chance, where we are held by a performance rating for a school by a single classroom. That is not fair to the student, it's not fair to the teacher, it's not fair to the school, and it's certainly not fair to the community. That's on us to solve. The small schools narrative has been a part of the education vernacular for a long time, but it's what makes District 11 different. Combining 3 250 elementary school students into one 750 kid building is not going to get us out of the challenges that we have in teaching and learning for our students. Having that small opportunity that each one of our leaders can actually know students and staff members, not just by name, but by need, will be the thing that accelerates us. Okay, questions to the background?
Okay, so let's open it up for questions. And then if you can confine the questions to what has been presented so far, and then if you have additional questions on the second and the third sections, we can come to that. Director Jurgensen.
Last week when you presented this from the 30,000-foot view, I asked about, because we do have classroom data, boiling that down to each teacher. So Ms. Hafley gets a report of her fourth graders from last year and going, okay, I'm at 35% in student growth percentile for my kids. In other words, if I'm a teacher looking at that, I'm saying my kids are not getting a year's worth of learning with the year they spent with me, correct? So I'm unsuccessful in educating those children. But then we're using that to resource those schools, right? And those teachers specifically?
Yes.
Okay, at what point do we go, we've tried what we need to try for you and we don't have time to wait. Like, you know, we're resourcing you, we're coaching you, we've brought all these pushing supports. But when we get that 2 years in a row of somebody in the 20th percentile or the 30th percentile, I mean, in any other economy or any other private job sector, that person is gone. So, you know, part of the problem with education is we have teachers who are careers and they love it and they're great at it. We also have folks who just go along to get along and we don't have time for that anymore. And that's a hard thing to say. I'm not attacking anybody. I'm just saying if we have teachers that aren't doing what we need them to do for kids, we have to either support them or we have to ask them to go somewhere else. And that's where we're at. We can't look at this data where we're in the bottom half of the state in our El Paso and Teller County. We can't do this anymore. We just can't.
Thank you. Is there just a comment at this time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just to be super clear on our strategy is we have long felt that the way to success is to train our way out of the challenges that we have. Now, this is the first year that we have codified an instructional strategy. We are CKLA, we are agency, and we are Eureka. Now, I know at secondary we'll have some additional things that come in there. And now we are training to and implementing to that standard. We believe that in the same way that we believe if our students show up and say, Mr. Jurgensen, I need a little bit of help in the following subject, that it is our obligation to align our resources to ensure that those children can succeed. We feel the same way for our staff. If our staff do not feel that way, then I will say that I believe that most adults will pursue the path of least resistance, which is a visit by the academic team for the 11th time in 3 weeks, and you're not responding. I think most people will choose to no longer be a part of a district that wants to train our teaching staff to the highest quality level of instruction. So I think it becomes a self-solving piece, and then we are happy to review data at the end of the year and determine if there have to be further actions in that regard.
I do have a follow-up, then I'm done.
Go ahead.
So with this classroom level data, this fall, are you having principals set aside a time to go over teacher scores with them?
I will default to anyone on the schools level team, but I mean, this has already been happening. You'll see some of
Well, I
this
think
much more at the end of the
the
brief.
section that comes second or third section,
The
it
answer
talks
is
more-
yes.
a little bit more about that.
And with incredible detail, and then to follow on to the secondary presentation this evening that the board will be presenting on academic strategies and metrics. That is a body of work that has evolved that we will be accountable to this year to the board.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, Dr. Hafley?
I have two. How do we repeat what's happening at Chipeta elsewhere?
We will give you those as we come forward. I haven't given you the Chipeta slide yet, so your question is early.
Okay. And have there ever been any questions raised about the test itself at the state level?
The CMAS? Yeah,
Can you expand on what you're asking, what you mean by that?
No.
there
I
was
mean,
an,
I could, you don't wanna hear it, it's
Yeah.
probably not
there's an assessment level working group.
crowd appropriate.
There's an assessment level working group that they pull superintendents and academics in from all over the state. There have been some modifications made to make the tests more accessible. But I don't believe the state is in any hurry to move away from a high school SAT standard. And I don't think that the state is gonna make many large changes to its CMAS model for 3 through 8.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions from Dr. Rao?
Can we get, I assume we got a district level specific reports that can save us all individually from having to go to the CDE website and pulling up the results. Is that something we can get?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Are you done?
I am, thank you. Yeah, when I look at this, I understand it's been presented with what you think is most important or what you want us to see and know, and I appreciate that. But I also wanna see some of the raw data, and that, we don't have that
Yeah.
as a group necessarily yet. So I'm just hopeful that we can get
Yeah,
that easily,
Yep,
rather
you
than
got that.
set
It'll
up
be
a
shared with the
story-looking.
board,
Isn't it public?
either through a Google Share document or something of that nature, okay? Any other comments or questions from the board at this time? If you can, I just have one comment out here. Superintendent Gall, if you can go to page 3 out there.
Lots of builds.
Oh, okay, then we'll have to go back.
And I realize I have to look at that one, the other one lags. Laggards.
There you go, that's the one. I'm looking at the last bullet point out there. The disaggregated data shows a significant need for instructional support in ELL programming.
Yep.
If you can elaborate a little bit on that and
We will cover it at the end, but I'll give you kind of the bottom line up front. The state has struggled. I think the best example I can give you is I'm super proud of the resourcing change that we made from Wonders to CKLA. The challenge that exists in the system is even the provider of that curriculum, we have the newest edition, of which they will release their ELA resources next year. The systems don't think holistically about needs of students in diverse districts. They sell you, here is the bulk of the curriculum. We are re-resourcing the last edition of our CKLA ELL materials to ensure that our CLDE staff gets what they need. Because our first answer was, well, we can provide them the current model, but we can only provide it to them digitally. The challenge is that many of our ELL teachers do not have a standalone smartboard because they don't have their own classroom, because it is the thing that comes after the thing. So we, and I also remind and thank the board that I believe it was 2 years ago in the 24 budget, we added approximately a dozen to a dozen and a half CLDE staff to our budget. We have not realized the gains from that staff, and so, we are expecting to deliver to the board in the second quarter a completely modified ELL strategy to make sure that we no longer are just saying, well, the state's down in ELL. It is a growing part of our enrollment that we continue to have more multi-language families come into the district. We have to have a strategy. We believe the overarching strategy that we have will also work, but we need the resources to align to that. And this year we were not able to get that direct tactile support from the vendor. We're making great inroads to cover that gap in the first couple of weeks of school. And so I appreciate the ELL staff and community members who've reached out on that.
so we can expect a feedback to the board in the second quarter on
Yeah.
a modified ELL strategy. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the second section with the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Kaliki. I love the bimodal one here. I appreciate when Dave talked about this isn't just by school, this is by building. You can walk into a building and you can see students that are gonna wow you with their academic resume, and then you're gonna ask, and why are those 10 kids not in a class right now? This idea of having to serve both ends is and has been a main part of our strategy of growing the head and shrinking the tail. But you can see that distribution can be masked, particularly at the secondary level, by either a performance or an improvement rating, that you'll get a different feel if you walk through the building. And so we're striving to actually make the darker drive what happens in the lighter. And I think we have some good examples as we come forward. Sorry, I'm just talking my way through Bill to your questions. Thank you, there were no questions. To the celebrations, I appreciate Director Hafley for certainly the first time since I've been here, and probably the first time in a couple of decades, the highest achieving school in all of El Paso County sits within the District 11 portfolio. So thank you to the Chipeta families, thank you to Chipeta staff, thank you primarily to those Chipeta students that work constantly. The sense of urgency that exists at Chipeta on instruction, Director Hafley, has to be matched in every school. There are not lost instructional minutes at Chipeta. The day this news came out, we went and bought a bunch of ice cream cakes as a symbol of the larger ice cream party that we'll have for the whole staff on October 3rd, for all the students on October 3rd. And we presented each teacher with a slice of ice cream cake. And not one of them lost an instructional minute in that space. They were talking about how much of the pie does this represent to kids, and how long is it hot in here? Is it gonna melt? Is it not gonna melt? The laser focus on agency and critical use of time on the curricular resources at Chipeta allows you to go from, we had a longstanding principal in Sarah Scott there for nearly a decade, and now Tiffany Brown is starting her full second year there, has allowed us to get so focused that the only school in El Paso County that has over 75% of its students achieving in math and ELA. They maxed out the points available, and they are the model, and it is not a socioeconomical only issue. If you walk, you will see an equitable distribution of special ed, IEP 504s, children of color. Chipeta is not what people want to believe that Chipeta is. Yes, it does happen to be in a more affluent part of our city, but it does have a cross-sectional set of services that it provides. Secondly, I appreciate Mitchell, George, your leadership is coming into fruition. We turned a real serious corner last year. I really think it was around our state presentation. So I am always thankful for accountability, because it is that accountability that has forced us to say some things that are hard to say. It was hard to say last year to the State Board of Education, we are not delivering the academic rigor that the students at Mitchell deserve. And having said that, has reset ourselves into a space. You heard last week very specifically from two teachers at Mitchell who represent the majority of the staff at Mitchell, that they believe in the strategies that we have and they are making difference for kids. We have a very long way to go at Mitchell High School. We are not excited to be priority improvement. We are super proud to no longer be in turnaround and have the traction that's moving forward to be able to continue to get Mitchell back to the excellence that it coveted several decades ago. Galileo with almost a 5% jump as well. The incredible inroads that are happening there, having services on site available for our students will be a game changer. I was with a turnaround leader in the county this morning, and they said, tell me about the community school initiative at Galileo. I said, the goal is for Galileo to not be a school that you go to because you don't know how to exercise choice. Galileo is a place that you choose because it's a community school initiative, because you know that you can get supports downstairs in the basement from the Ascent Center that then turns into your ability to return to instruction and not lose the day or lose the week because you weren't there. And the work that's happened at Adams, I appreciate the board president joined us for a surprise visit at Adams just this week. Walking in and seeing our leader in Carolyn Graham actually driving the strategies of the district, and I saw her very specifically watch in a classroom where the opening question was too broad and it was on a Monday and the kids didn't remember what happened on Friday, and Carolyn Graham said, you know, if we use some of our agency tools right now, maybe the kids will be more responsive. And just in that 1 second, when we got our kids into their roles, into student teaming, now magically fifth graders remembered what the word algorithm meant and they were able to get themselves back on instruction. But at first, the cold call, you can imagine a fifth grader describing the word algorithm on a Monday was not well received. So super excited for that and their affirmation that the strategies of this district will continue to deliver for us across the way. I'm gonna stay on the celebrations and then we'll get into some of those harder conversations. This is no surprise, these are the schools that have always achieved. There's a couple of things that I wanna highlight here. I wanna highlight the strength of a portfolio. Our families have choice. David was alluding to that bimodal distribution. When we lose families for enrollment, and I appreciate the work that Mr. Kilroy has done on the connection between Chipeta and Holmes. We were losing not just 50% of our fifth graders at Chipeta, we were losing the top performing 50% of the fifth graders at Chipeta. That's not what's happened this year. Those families, I think 80% of those families have committed to Holmes because we made an intentional connection. But the portfolio strategy works. You can see that more of our offerings are on the top end of this than those that are on the bottom end of it. There is still a distribution challenge across our city. I don't think that's a surprise for anybody who walks our city. And of particular shout out, I can't remember if they're on ELA or math, but I want to make sure, particularly when people play these tapes back, the Jenkins team. The Jenkins team. Last year in January, we had to dislocate the entirety of a middle school. The number one ask from that staff and that principal was, can we get special dispensation from the state to get a free year because this is chaotic to our instruction. The overall SPF from Jenkins went up and they reached the top. Somebody point for it there. Is it on the ELA side?
ELA.
It's on the ELA side.
Third
And they
from
were
the
very
bottom.
close to meeting that number for the math side as well. So do not ever be confused that it is the ability to stay focused on what your strategy is that will deliver change. And so in two different locations on a moment's notice, that team, every member of that team, whether they liked 7th and 8th grade at Doherty and whether they liked 6th grade at Russell or they thought we should have done something else, they showed up for children. And so hats off to everybody at Jenkins, hats off to the family members that stayed with us, and hats off to the community that rallied around and allowed us to make that very difficult operational decision that actually positively showed up in our academic achievement there. I want to shift quickly to the winners and the things that we see on our secondary side. I just want everybody to see that the pecking order is clear. I don't want anybody to be confused. People ask me all the time, why do you always talk about Coronado and why do you go to Coronado? Why did Coronado's block schedule drive what we did for all the other high schools? Because Coronado statistically significantly is outperforming our other high schools. Now, I'm not proud of anybody's math score. Let's be clear, we have to improve what's happening in math. But it's not in the margin of error anymore. Coronado has shown that if they hire the right staff and treat their staff with respect and create a schedule that works for families and students, that you can start to be head and shoulders above what's happening in other high schools. I appreciate how our other high schools have adapted to the common block schedule, and they are all showing improvement. I was very proud of what we saw happen in our SAT, and you can see that we're still struggling in the pre-SAT world. The more the kids are exposed to the adaptive tests that the College Board gives us in pre-SAT and SAT, the more likely they are to achieve on that, and I think we're seeing that very clearly. Post-secondary readiness, this is what we would normally call page 3. We are seeing, I call these both leading and a little bit of lagging indicators. Page 3 has been a challenge for District 11, not because we haven't been doing things the right way, we haven't been reporting them in a consistent way. That is all tightened up. This goes a little bit to Director Jurgensen, to some of your implementation work. You can see that the graduation rate is increasing, the matriculation rate is increasing, the dropout rate is decreasing. None of those are at the level that they should be. We ought to be able to guarantee a parent that if you pay your taxes and you send your kid to public school and you support your child through that, they have better than a 74.5% chance of graduating in 4 years. That's gotta be in the upper 80s, and it's gonna take us time to get there. That's a larger conversation with our community on the value of public education, but you can see highlighted in here the actual examples of where these numbers are coming up. The state is changing the way it does SPFs for high schools. This year will be the last year that we are rated the way we are rated, and these are lagging data, so it'll really be a 2-year chase. I think the great news as I go to the next, I'm sorry, if I stay on this slide, is the work that District 11 has done, particularly on its CTE, its dual and its concurrent enrollment, will be of great benefit to us on the SPF score when all those ripples have played out over time. So we are well positioned, probably better positioned than the other districts in the region to be prepared for that. But it will change at the end of this year to be implemented next year, but the counter doesn't really come to the year after that. So we're seeing good growth on page 3. I appreciate every counselor and every professional at the high school level who has helped get better tracking on this for us to be able to have data that we can act on. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the work that we did to study where our teachers leaned in on agency, and I think I'm handing off to David again, is that correct?
Take the next slide, those slides. So what we looked at here with agency within instructional empowerment is that they produce a data set that tells us what level of badging a specific teacher gets to. So the badging process is, I've been learning a ton from this process of being out in schools and being able to go out and we're calibrating our observer ratings, we're really dialing that in. What are we looking for? What are we seeing? How do we document it? At the front end of that is a training an assessment model that IE uses for badging at a 101 level, the 201, 301. They've charted it out to see these are the types of instructional moves that you should see in a 101 classroom, a 201, and so on. So I grabbed that data set from them. They've been great to work with on the data end. And then what we did was we ran this analysis of among teachers, and this was a little bit earlier from this year, the numbers of badged teachers has significantly increased. So it's a sample population. But we looked at the 101 and 201 teachers, pulled those classrooms, did a little bit, I'll get geeky with you for just a moment, get a quasi-experimental sample where we matched, basically, we had matching like students for the badged teachers and the non-badged students. Okay, that's my moment. So that's what's creating this distribution. So what you see on the performance side is that we saw with that matched sample between badged and non-badged teachers a 6% increase between the control group and the treatment group, the control group being non-badged. So we saw a 6% increase in percent passing. This is with an ELA. And then when we look at growth, because remember we're looking at both ends of that at every turn, we saw bumps of 4 MGP points between control and treatment. So you can see that it's a shift of effect and an effect size based on that with an early analysis. We're going to continue this analysis as we grow the number of badged teachers, especially as we get into 301, 401. Is there an inflection point? Is there, are there different pieces that we can start to look at? We also have the metrics pulling from observations of a nice continuous variable, not just a yes or a no, but to what degree, what percentage of time, what percentage of effort is being done at these different agency-driven metrics that we can start to add into the model and in control for different things. So very, very promising initial round of analysis. That analysis will continue, and we'll be able to report on that at later points as well. So I think,
Sorry, Carol, that way.
Other way.
You can hold on to it because you're the next two and you can just click for me. But part of the work in my department is really to connect action to every piece of data that we come out of our data department. So what you just briefed on there in terms of the impact of our work with IE and with agency in our classrooms is then how do we measure what's actually happening for kids in these spaces, right? We know it's working, but what exactly is the instructional move that's working and how do we scale that up? And so I know Dave briefed on this vision of we see these significant differences in how students are performing. When you go into these spaces, I was actually in 10 schools Monday, what we can see in our classrooms is really it's about the role of the student in the instructional vision. Right, so in classrooms where we're not getting this kind of data yet, what we're seeing is that very traditional, I know the superintendent shared this, but back and forth. I ask a question, I wait for a response. I ask a question, I wait for a response. And in that space, at any one time in a class of 25, we may have 24 kids who are not doing that thinking or that learning. And so what you see here graphically represented in that photo is really this idea of how do we increase the amount of lift happening for students at the same rate with only one teacher, right? So you see in all three of those, you'll see the T for teacher. But in the first graphic, what you see is that's a teacher throwing out the question and then waiting for a response, or giving an exit ticket and then waiting to see the answer. But what you see in the shift to the right side of that model is really it's about a teacher putting that task, that difficult opportunity for kids, making sure that kids independently understand what they're being asked to do, but then they're using their peers to lift up that cognitive thinking, right? They're working on whatever that rigorous task is together. And then the teacher's role is really to monitor individual student progress, but also individual students are monitoring their progress. I had a really positive example of this in a classroom I was in earlier, where I walked into a classroom, a third grade classroom, and you could see kind of every kid leaned over, right? It was one of those moments in education, sometimes we call that like bottoms up learning, I'll use that term here, right? But kids are leaned in, like you can feel the energy in that space. And I was standing with the principal and I said, wow, this is an incredible group of students. And the principal made mention to the fact that one of the students that was so deeply engaged was a student who'd been deeply involved in the discipline system the previous year. So much so that the principal and the teacher weren't sure that the kid would make it. Right, and what you saw in this classroom was not just that that kid was compliant, right? I think sometimes we're studying like, well, did we reduce discipline? But what we're not actually measuring is, did the child learn something, right? Did we actually get them to a space where it wasn't about are they compliant, it was about are they shifting to that achievement and the growth that we want to see for every child. And what we were able to measure from this classroom coming out of last year is that yes, that's a child that's exceeding our growth outcomes and is one of the children represented in that study. And so here on this slide, you just have an opportunity to see our initial, what we would consider early adopter schools, and David can speak more to the individual data that you see listed below. But what I can share is we are, all in on this vision of how do we get these schools this advanced training. So these are schools that engaged with our IE partner over the last 2 years for about half of them on that list, last year for the other half. We took all of the schools that you see up there, in addition to several other school leaders, I know you heard from the principal of North, to a conference this summer, along with their teacher leaders, to really bring these ideas into practice. David mentioned before that we have several teachers who kind of advanced in their trajectory, right? So these are teachers that have really gotten this off the ground. At present, with the numbers we most recently pulled, we had about 30 teachers at what we would consider this 301 level, which is where we're really seeing that huge significant difference, okay? We have 50 more teachers in a pipeline for that as of last week. So if last year we got 35, we are already at a pace to double that at this early in the school year. And so we're just really rapidly taking the data from Dave's shop and saying, how do we put it into practice as quickly as possible?
Questions on the wins?
Yeah. So what you looked at, that Dave?
Can we take what we've done with Chipeta and repeat it elsewhere?
Yeah.
That's my new question.
I wish it were as simple. I wish scalability was the same as repeating. It just is not quite that simple. What I would say to you is that we have several schools that have shown over time a proclivity towards strong achievement, of which many of our model classrooms are now housed. And we will be requiring, particularly as we do this pro-serve model, if your performance is here to Director Jurgensen's, it's no longer optional on what your matters of recourse are. You now have to get exposed to any of those model classrooms, and to some of the work that we did this summer in our conference. Teachers from Chipeta were at that conference. And so this isn't how does everybody run up the hill. This is how do we codify, raise up what we see happening in Chipeta and see that it can work, not just in a different school, but even for a different special population. How do we deliver that same level of agency and use of resources with incredible urgency towards instructional time? Remember, you probably don't need to use every minute at Chipeta if the kids are at 75 and 76 for ELA for math. But if you do, you get 75 and 76, right? And so We are working to use these as the models, as much as I shared about the things that we've seen at your former school of where you taught, that yes, you can do this. And you know this, that the reputation from Coronado might be, oh, that's on the west side. You know as well as I do that the kids at Coronado are all just like the kids all over Colorado Springs, right? But there's an intentionality into believing in the vision of the school leader and the strategy of which the district can support at that individual school level. That becomes the difference maker. There's no lack of vision at schools that perform.
If I may just elaborate a little bit on what Superintendent Gall shared, and one of the discussions that we as a board always talk about, and we gave kudos to Chipeta students, Chipeta teachers, but a critical component that is present at Chipeta and sometimes lacking in several of our other schools is parent engagement. Chipeta, high level of parent engagement out there. So I'll share my experience visiting one of the schools that Superintendent talked about. Being at the school, I walk into the classroom and it's a different demographics of population. So the teacher first has to ensure that the student is not hungry, okay? Because when they are hungry, they are not able to focus on the instruction that is happening. So the student, when Superintendent Gall is saying that at Chipeta, not 1 minute of that instructional time is let go or wasted, here the teacher has to first ensure that the student is adequately prepared to process the learning that happens. I was at a table where there was a child, and I'm working on a math problem that the teacher had put on that screen up there. This child is squinting, is not able to see the screen at all. And then I asked the child specifically, have you gone and talked to your parents about checking for if you need glasses? And the child just shrugs the shoulders and say, I don't know. You know, if I can notice that within 5 minutes of sitting with the child, you would think that parents would be engaged enough to spot that this child probably needs glasses, and without glasses, he or she is not going to receive the highest quality. You would not see that at Chipeta. Okay, how do you, a community school is the Galileo, where they can go into the basement and get those type of supports? Yeah, maybe that's it. We are working towards that at every single school. It's sometimes replicating what happens at Chipeta at other schools, not just because parent engagement is so much more critical.
And although they didn't make the list on achievement, to make it less stark of the difference between the school you're referring and a Chipeta neighborhood, Queen Palmer every year turns growth into achievement. Almost, we had a 50% cut line on there. Were they in the 40s, right? Queen Palmer is no different than any other school in the Central and Southeast by the neighborhood that it sits within. Very intentional. If anybody has seen Principal Christina Butcher, she literally, and everyone see the kid that plays a chessboard, like 12 chessboards at once. That's how Christina Butcher manages her small school. She knows every learning objective that's happening in every classroom, and she walks her way down all day, and she has staff that is able to deliver on that. And we have found, and now I'm starting my 4th year, I was very concerned to see growth performance rating at a Title I school if it doesn't start to transition into achievement. She's broken that code, and not at a Chipeta level of achievement of 75 yet, but if a kid's a year and a half behind, which is a very soft measure, an exceptional school can get a year and a quarter's worth of learning done for a kid. So if you're a year and a half behind, you gotta stay in that school 2 years and have no obstacles and no bumps to make up that half a year. We have that model, not just at Chipeta, we have that model, you've seen it at Queen Palmer, we have that model, Audubon, if you were to go back a slide as part of that early cohort. We know that with great intentionality and the fidelity of which we can implement our strategies, we can get every one of our students to the space that they need to get to.
Okay. Other questions on this? Director Carey.
I'm tracking the strategies around agency and coaching for teachers. What specifically are we doing to kind of manage the trade-off between tier 1 instruction and the necessary catch-up work that has to happen when you have students who are behind grade level? Like, what's our actual plan for that?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Dr. Comfort answer that, cause he is so eloquently shared with the team the need to make sure that we're able to do both at the same time.
Yeah, it's like I gave you that question to ask. I did not, but it has been a really fundamental part of our conversation. A primary part of the strategy that has existed in this district for the last couple of years and continues is quality tier 1 instruction. The academic shop is hyper focused, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, on improving the teaching and learning that's happening in classrooms, especially classrooms that have struggling data. That doesn't change that a student is entering into this school year with less than grade level skills, right? So what we've said from the beginning is it has to be both. We have to continue our steadfast focus on tier 1 instruction and coaching and developing a teacher, because that will stop future students from falling below grade level, while we also have strong intervention programs to keep and catch kids up. So we're walking schools, we're looking at master schedules. I don't know if Adams is here, but we were at Adams earlier this week and we pulled their schedule off the board and we said, okay, we can see where your coaching's happening, where's your win time? And so she said, bop, bop, bop. We are training on the 3 primary intervention tools that we use for literacy as a district. And so we're being really, really clear. I think we missed that over the last couple of years, in full transparency. Doesn't mean we weren't doing interventions, but because we were so focused on tier 1 instruction at this layer, at this level of organization, we lost the touch point with, are we ensuring that good interventions are happening across all schools? So I can tell you that is in every single school conversation right now. Yes, improve the quality of teaching and learning, and you have to change that student's knowledge level right now to give them a fighting chance. Because otherwise, this year's tier 1 skills become next year's tier 2 skills.
We are always interested in the board's interest in increasing instructional time opportunities. We have obligated to yet another restructure for Summer Bridge. We would love to have conversations with the board on changing policy about promotion at critical grade levels for students that have not been responsive to either the tier 1 or the tier 2 intervention, to ensure that we don't continue the snowball effect that you really feel at high schools. As we get to some of the data here in depth, you'll see that middle schools actually way outperformed both our expectation and some of the regional things, which is good news for high schools. But the confounding and the snowballing effect that comes from every time we don't get tier 1 instruction right or find the correct intervention, I do think is going to require some larger policy conversation. I've been on the record before. I don't know if holding kids back is the answer, but I promise you the greatest risk to America is not social promotion, it's illiteracy, right? So holding a kid back is not as big of a threat to their future as it is the fact that they go in through the system and they can't read. And not we as in District 11, but generally the system allows to think that we'll catch up further down the road. Nobody's been able to catch up really once you get past kind of that end of elementary school. So it is an area of focus for us, but I do think there is time and conversation for extended learning times and opportunities, of which we would be happy to bring to the board for with recommendation and decision.
Is this a place where you feel like you need some board weighing in? Because I know that like Jason and I both have gotten on the bandwagon of maybe we should hold students back if they're not actually academically ready for the next grade. But I don't, at this moment, think we've actually had any real rigorous discussions of what that would look like from a policy standpoint. I'm not suggesting that as the kind of final end of the conversation. What I'm asking is this something that it would be worth having a discussion in specific with the board at some point? Yes. Or do you feel like this is something you can handle with the team?
No, I think we need to hear very clearly from the board that there is a general shift in what we believe the responsibility of public education is. Right now, the system is still too passive to the student or the family's participation, of which then, I own every number that's on there. I'm the superintendent, I'm the sole employee of the board, and yet I barely own the staff's ability to implement, let alone I have zero influence over the family in the space. And so you've heard me say before, how do we get to a place where we guarantee that if you bring your kid to school 95% of the time, that if you do an hour's worth of homework, if you read to your child for a half an hour before bed, or create some mechanism for literacy in your house, if you do that, then we guarantee you, oh, and you take advantage of before school, after school tutoring, summer school programming, Saturday academies, we guarantee you that you can read at the end of third grade. The state, we talked about this in another setting just the other day, that the state of Mississippi passed a law that said you can't go to fourth grade until you can read at the end of third grade. We now in the nation are studying Mississippi and Alabama. Never did anyone say in public education that you would study those two states, but because they came down very hard from a policy perspective that said this is critical to the future economic growth and health of our state. That's what they said. They didn't say that there aren't circumstances of which many of our families are challenged by. We understand all of those things. All those things can be true while we say we will move heaven and earth to make sure that your kids read by the end of third grade. Because if we don't, we have a READ Act. Never have I ever sent the READ Act up to the state, and have they ever sent anything back? And said, well, you're doing better, can we study it? You're doing worse, you should go study this. It literally is a one-way gonculator of information that maybe the funding should change. If you don't increase, you're gonna lose funding instead of the way it exists right now. So I do think the board being very clear of what those expectations are of not just my team, but of the constituents of which we serve. It says this is a partnership. The partnership has to be, get out of bed, you don't have a fever, go to school. It's gotta be that. That's how it was for everybody that is around the table.
And we started this discussion to some extent, Director Carey's point, with the middle school accountability last year. How do we bring, because that's an area where our students are falling behind, and by the time they get into high schools, they are so far behind. So we are having that discussion at this time. I strongly believe that every student can achieve and thrive. It's setting those expectations, a culture of high expectations with the students right from the very first day of school, and letting them know that this is not acceptable. I was at Galileo, and I appreciate the principal who's sitting in the back out there. You brought the 7th grade students out there into your auditorium and had that frank conversation with them about accountability, that if you were going to have Fs in your at the end of the year, you are going to be held back. And I saw some of those students' eyes pop out there, which is the message you want to deliver right at the very beginning of the school year. Any other questions?
I know I asked two.
Yeah,
Can I
go
ask
ahead.
a third if
Go
it's
ahead.
a clarifying question? You used the phrase win time earlier. I don't know what that means.
What I need.
Yeah, what I need, so intervention time where every student is getting something at the skill level that they need it.
Gotcha.
Any other questions at this time?
EI for you.
So that,
Give EI.
I
Yeah,
guess the
go
question
ahead.
would be like, what action is gonna be taken based on Dr. Gary's question, and is that something that the board's ready to move forward with right now? And solicit
Yeah, I
feedback?
think Superintendent Gall, that middle school accountability especially is going to come in front of the board at some point in time with some clear recommendations. And the board has already indicated that we want to move into that space. Set that high expectations for students and deliver that message back to our parents as well.
I would say maybe
Go ahead.
more of a deeper question too, though, about like, when are they going to be holding students back? Are we ready to hear all of those things, possible summer school? Sounds like there's a lot of opportunities to make sure that we're not just promoting kids who can't read, and I think there's a lot of evidence to show that school to a prison pipeline if you don't have these kind of skills here. So I'd love to see that taken as aggressively as possible.
And those are the recommendations that will come. Whether it is holding the kid back in a grade for another year, or that the kid is required to take summer bridge, and provided they take the summer bridge and show the necessary gap closing, then they can move on to the next grade. Okay, that we can set as a policy from the district level. We may certainly get some pushback from some of the families, when you mandate that students have to take summer bridge because you're falling behind. Not all families may be on board with that. You got to be ready to take on that challenge at this time. on behalf of students. Dr. Art, you
Just was curious about when we were going to hear back on the middle school accountability part of the conversation.
October.
October, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I do want to point out, before we go to the next thing, some of the celebrations that were there. Several of our schools that did really well. Awesome that these schools are setting the standard for achievement and growth in our schools. We will, as a board, recognize those schools as we normally do. Schools that in their school performance framework achieved 75, I think, or above. They will be at a future board meeting where we can recognize them and give them that accreditation with performance and distinction category out there. And I do, if quickly you can, whoever's got that, to move 2 slides back. One more. Those things that we are seeing from 2024 to 2025, the 4-year rate, the matriculation rate, dropout rate, it's all moving in the right direction. Okay, that's a significant jump in each one of those categories. When I was looking at the SPF, for the 4-year graduation rate, 75% or above moves us to the next level, which means that we get more points in that third page, however they figure that out. And the same thing with the dropout rate. If the dropout rate falls below 2%, we move to the next level. And all it requires is moving in the same direction one more year, and we are going to be scoring more on those SPF scores, how they tabulate out there. We are moving in the right direction. So from 1 year to a next year, seeing the jump moving in the right direction, that's very promising out there. And then go forward 2 slides at the last 2. Yeah, and this one to me speaks about the early adopters have seen success. So when some of our teachers came up here and shared how it's made a difference, but their experiences initially, they were reluctant to adopt some of these strategies because they were comfortable in how they've delivered instruction. But when student agency became the focus, you can see the trend moving in the right direction. We just have to move from those early adopters to ensuring that these best practices are scaled up to other schools as well. Is there anything you need from us as far as that goes, Superintendent Gall?
Not at this time.
Okay, great.
Actually, I would say yes, please come visit. And when you visit, ask specifically for model classrooms. You're always welcome in any classroom, but we'd love for you to see the places where we have the actual experience to back up some of those numbers, because anytime there is change, there will be discomfort. And so you will hear from people that they don't like or they don't think. I welcome anybody with a wheelbarrow full of data to come here and yes and us and make this better. But if you're a SGP below 40, as are some of my greatest naysayers on social media, have SGPs in the 20s. It's really hard to challenge the strategy when you're SGPs in the 20s.
Yeah. Back to your team for the next.
Great. Yeah, I'll own this one. Again, it's flat. It's not as high as we would like it to be. I think some of the reporting challenges is that we have, we'll get to this towards the end, but we have more schools on the list than we did last year. The good news is the schools that we spent our time with that were on the list all moved up. One off the list in Galileo, with some participation. Mitchell moving up a layer, and Adams, again, is very close to that next level. But it's a bit of a water balloon in the district. We are in a place now where we have the right structure centrally to be supportive of where we know that we have gaps and not just rely on whether or not a principal gets that right. But we had a little bit of a water balloon effect this year that we pushed in at Mitchell, Galileo, and Adams and saw what we needed to see, and then some other schools slipped back. But still, we are growing. I think the hardest part of that slide is to say, way to go team, we're almost at 40% for ELA and still at below a third for math. And so anybody that is considering how it is they want to show up in our district, we have very clear data that from an SPF perspective, a teacher of record absence equates to 2 points of loss within that performance band. And those bands are only about 12 points deep. So if a teacher is a teacher of record, a highly qualified teacher, is absent for 6 days, we have risk of losing an entire band of SPF in that classroom. And so I know I'm the crazy guy on snow days, and I know I'm the crazy guy that says, please ask us to come forward with, do we add instructional days? Do we add instructional minutes to the system? And we were giving out flowers the other day, and somebody said, we need more recess time, we need more playtime. Absolutely, but not at the risk of taking away instructional time. So if we want to do a double recess, great, then let's add a day to the beginning and a day to the end of the year. We'll find the money for it. We're happy to bring those ideas forward, but we don't have enough time. The lack of urgency in our system, when we are at 40, not even 40, I'm rounding up for my own benefit here, 39% and 31.1%, right? Remember, again, don't be confused, every school in District 2 is labeled as a Title I school. And they outperform us in ELA, they outperform us in math, and they outperform us in district performance framework. It's not that complicated. Access to high quality instruction is the way that you increase opportunities for children to break the cycles of poverty and lack of learning that have existed in our district for a long time. We will increase the steepness of this vector. We will always suffer from a school that will unexpectedly move down. We're moving much quicker on making those corrections. You'll see some of those actions that were in there before. But these median growth percentiles have to get higher. Those SGPs, those individual student growth percentiles by teacher, are being monitored and have to be in the 40s and 50s for us to know that we're moving in the right direction. David?
Okay. All right, so if we take a little bit of a deeper dive, so we'll go elementary, middle school, and high school. And so Director Ott, I'll just point out the source of this data is all publicly available. I can hook you up with that. It's an awesome data file. Makes me so happy. So I just wish it came out before the end of August. That's why I'm asking. So we had some, in elementary, the story is the takeaway is that we had marginal movement. So it was, you'll see flat across most of the metrics. And that's where we then suffered from a low MGP. It compounds itself, and then you get the kind of results that we saw there. So it either remained flat or shrunk at the elementary level in math. And again, don't ever want to lose sight that even if we do have some numbers to celebrate, which we will in just a minute, 34% passing in math is not a metric we are going to sit at. It's just not acceptable, and it's not the promise that we make to our constituents and taxpayers. So when we look at the middle school, however, we do see another story happening, that we see this positive momentum. And I'm not going to make corollary, or I'm not going to make causal relationships yet, but I think what you really start to invest in and what you really start to look at closely starts to change. And I think the leadership from this board in looking at those middle school metrics we're starting to see some early dividends. We definitely want that slope to inflect much steeper, but we get an ELA increase overall of 2%. So we're up to 40%, and the math increased by 4%. So remember, our district goal is 4 to 5% to meet across the district. And so we met that in math, which is one area in particular in middle school that we've struggled with for years. For as long as I've been here, middle school math has been a real bugaboo for us. And so to see that increase is encouraging. When we see shrinking the bottom, ELA stayed flat, but again, math is our story. Math shrunk. Remember, that's a good number, shrinking the red by 2%. Not up to district goal, but we saw it. So we see that then and reflected, right? In ELA growth, 51, middle school math growth, 47. This is an interesting little tidbit, is where we saw math increasing, we still are underperforming to a large degree in math growth. That's because it's a movable scale, right? It's all dependent on how the state is moving, so middle school math generally popped up at a greater rate than we saw. But we are changing that trajectory on both the top and the bottom. I jumped into some of the disaggregated results. I was doing that today, and I'm just doing some comparison of region. So this data file has all the school districts, all the schools in the state, percent passing, and all the stuff. And so when we start to disaggregate, one huge story that's for us, I think that we can celebrate is sixth grade math. We saw a plus 6% bump up in percent passing at sixth grade math. That is I taught math, right? So that is such a foundational time because that's the jump to algebraic thinking from arithmetic thinking. And I think that's exciting. That actually puts us at the top of our region. So the next closest competitor, D20 at 3.4. So I am happy to say we doubled D20's results in our sixth grade. Eighth grade, we saw a plus 5.4. That puts us in the lead in our region. Sixth grade ELA, we saw a small bump, plus 1, but that actually outpaced the rest of our region as well. So that kind of gives you an idea of kind of some of the flatness across eighth grade ELA. Let's see, and I think eighth grade math, then we saw a plus 4 bump. So across these subcategories, these grade levels, we're actually seeing some real positive growth. That eighth grade bump is also very encouraging because that's the jump into high school. I've been having some great conversations between high school leadership and middle school leadership and really looking at, Area Superintendent Joyner's been a part of these conversations to say, like, how can we make that jump? Because that PSAT jump is significant. From a CMAS type of question to a PSAT type of question is a big deal. And we're leaving lots of points on the table simply because this is the first time they might be seeing a college board level question. So these are all the types of questions, conversations that are happening underneath the data. When we look at high school, we're looking at college readiness. This is the way that the college board sets their markers. So percent college ready rather than percent passing is the language. And we can see, I think I'm handing this back to you, Mike. So we can
Yeah,
see
I'm
the
supposed to
numbers
brief,
there.
you got it.
Yeah.
So I'll just chime in. We saw some moderate growth on the ELA side. I think the good news on the math is we stemmed the loss, but it's still flat. I do anticipate that some of this middle school success that we've seen will start to chime its way in there. We've done some real serious work on, Mitchell was a pilot program for us for exposing our students to these adaptive tests, to a college board test more frequently so they understand that work and what that expectation is. It is a real gap, Director Hafley, to your question about is the state looking at the test itself. What CMAS evaluates is mostly skills-based, and what SAT evaluates is mostly adaptive in your ability to apply that learning, which is why you see a lot of those changes. But we did see a bump in the 11th grade SAT scores, but the overall numbers are flat because they've been drugged down by the pre-SAT 9 and 10 lack of movement. But again, still not meeting our growth expectation. Over back to you, David.
Alrighty. So if we take a little bit deeper dive in high school, PSAT 9, PSAT 10, and SAT are all different, distinctly different tests, especially when you get up to the SAT. And so we can see that overall, we got a little bit of bump in EBRW. That's evidence-based reading and writing. That's the equivalent of ELA in SAT language. Got a small bump there. Math, we had a significant decrease at that 9th grade level. And so this is interesting. This will be interesting to watch because we got a big bump at math, CMAS math, 8th grade, and then watching to see what that will translate to in PSAT, not just watching as in a voyeuristic fashion, hoping for the best, but now saying what can we leverage in that CMAS test that the 8th graders can bring over and we can build from. We have a habit of getting some gains, getting some good gains, dropping those gains and then starting from level 0 again. We can't keep doing that. And so we have an opportunity to really leverage the strengths that's coming in from that math work that's happened at the middle school. It's a big shout out to those teachers and those leaders. At PSAT 10, the general trend is that over 9, 10, and then into SAT, we see gaps being closed, but generally starting at such a low level and that slope being too small. We need to inflect that slope and then start at a higher level and leverage, like I said, what we're getting out of middle school. So EBRW stayed flat, but math increased by 5. So we have kind of a flip, an inversion of what we see at 9. This was actually a pretty common trend, I think around the nation and definitely around the state. The PSAT 10 math did increase. So again, when that happens, we celebrate the 5%, we increase the percent passing, but when it's happening across the state, we don't benefit necessarily from the growth metric, right? So the growth there being 46 is a reflection of that. It was true for the state. These are all the variables that we're playing with and keeping in mind as we plan and strategize. And then SAT, we got some really nice jumps there. Closed some gaps. At that point, like that, this is our ticket out the door, right? This is our promise to our communities. You will be college level, college ready. Whether you choose college as your option, you will be thinking at a college level, you'll have a vocabulary at a college level, and you'll have a reading level that will put you in that standing. And I'm just passionate about that SAT score being the score for all of us from 3rd grade on. Like, this is our ultimate promise. Your student, you do all the work that is needed to bring your student along. We'll deliver and have that as our number out the door. Whether we like that number or not is another conversation, but that is our number, and that's the one we're going to continue to hone in on. So when we get a 6% jump at EBRW for SAT, that's something to celebrate. That's significant and that matters. And again, SAT across the state generally took a jump, and so we see a little bit lower growth metric, and so that's where that comes from. So there is celebration at high school, but again, we just have to accelerate that growth to outpace the state and to get our numbers up above out of the 40s and 30s in math and ELA. So now this is an analysis that we're really looking at and diving into, so I'm going to hand it off to Chief Scheer to talk about some of our subpopulation strategies.
Great. So as we talked about a little bit earlier, as statewide subgroup data, it continues to be a concern, and D11 is no different there. Some highlights just to point out is that our free and reduced lunch as well as our minority are in that approaching area. And with 10 to 15 point gains, we can get those categories to the meets. So I think that is a highlight in an area we can focus it on. With our ELL and SPED populations, we still are in that do not meet area. And so when we look at that at a district level, we see that. So we've been diving into the schools that are seeing some good gains. So when we look at the school level, we have schools that are meeting requirements for achievement in students with disabilities as well as those with ELL identifications. And we're looking into see what are the practices happening in those buildings that we can help scale to other places. And what we're seeing is that schools that have strong teaming structures, that have strong tier 1 high quality instruction are also the same schools that are getting results with these populations. A good example, I was in a classroom the other day that was had a student who was hearing impaired and had an ASL interpreter with them. And traditionally, you might see that individual in the back of the classroom. This student was included with their team and was engaging in that work. And so those types of experiences for our students are going to help close those gaps. So we're starting to see that starting to be more widespread within our schools. So we see that the pieces that we're looking for are that high quality tier 1 instruction, really strong on push-in support, so all students with disabilities and multilingual learners are getting that tier 1 instruction. And then that there also is a strong intervention system within the school that is highly responsive when students aren't responding. So those are the pieces that we're looking for. We've also shifted our instructional model, so as many of you know, we now have academic directors for each of the different areas. With that academic director is also a individualized education facilitator who supports special education, ELL, and GT students. And then we also have an individualized education coach. So we have those layers of support that we can deploy to schools that are having more difficulty with that population. And then finally, we also have continued to expand within special education, our inclusion support programs that really help build agency in our students with the most significant special education needs, and so that we can make sure that they're getting the high quality targeted interventions they need to be successful as well.
Can I just add one piece to this? The opportunity, if you look at the two right-hand columns, furthest right-hand columns, those are points needed. Those are scale score points. So what the superintendent was talking about with absence, look at how close we are in some cases to really changing the overall story of both elementary and middle. when we're talking about 5 scale score points across at the district level, 12 scale score points at the district level, very often we'll have high overlap between FRL, FRPL is what it's referred to up there, and minority. We can get both of those moving at the same time. You can really see that in ELA and elementary. We are on the verge in so many of those categories to flip those over to green. That translates all the way down the SPF, and that moves the entire district as well as schools. Schools are looking at this type of analysis. You'll probably hear it with some of our UIP work, but to look at what does 5 scale score points or 8 scale score points look like at a school? It looks like 7, 8 kids moving up a performance band. I mean, these are the types of goals that we're setting. So really looking at the student level, where can we get the most bang for the buck? And if these are the rules of the game that we are handed, we're gonna play this. And we're very close on multiples of those. So the work that Chief Scheer is leading and the whole group, I think you'll see those changes over time.
Next slide. All right, I'm gonna on the left side of this slide because I'm the guy that likes to talk about numbers and schools. We've added schools to the priority improvement turnaround list. We are now at the 7 that you see there. With having Mitchell, Galileo, and Adams be the pre-existing, we have added a few new ones. We were close last year and we thought Swigert might actually fall into priority improvement. They did not. We had pre-identified that Swigert, we would add them to our intensive support supports with IE. So we were way out in front of that. Carver, we had requested, or we put in a request to reconsider, and Carver actually slid backwards. And so we're working very diligently with that team. And Wilson caught us by surprise. You'll hear from each one of these leaders as they come forward with their USIPs to talk about where those surprises were. But Wilson really fell into that small schools category that we shared with you earlier on how the challenges of an individual grade level can really make a growth measured school swing wildly in one direction or another. What I can say to you is that with all the intention and intenseness that I think that I bring to my role, this has not gone unnoticed, and I'm not going to brief the right-hand slide here because then I'm only validating either myself or my own intention. And so I've asked the deputy who has been in each one of these meetings to kind of cover how we've talked about this and acted differently than we have in the past. This is not about a USIP. The USIP is part of the thing that we have to present to you, but this is not about the USIP that goes to the board. This is about a set of actions that have been much tighter. Dr. Comfort.
Yeah, I will say that we are frustrated by the left-hand column. I will also say, as much as we tried to contain and keep focus last year, we knew that we were not fulfilling on that obligation, which is why we brought to the board such a large academics restructure at the end of the year. I know at that time it felt large, it felt maybe even too large, but it was in response to what we knew was coming. We didn't know that these results were going to be these results, but we knew we were not fulfilling on our obligation to support schools instructionally. So now we're well positioned for that. That has happened. We have worked through those kinks. They are firing on all cylinders. I want to talk about some of the things that we've done differently that I am incredibly proud of, that I've never seen in this district or in any other district that I've worked in with regards to results. So you see the schools on the left, but beyond the schools on the left, every single school that had a reduction in their overall SPF, the superintendent, as well as I, a member of the academics team, and their area superintendent met with them. And as the superintendent alluded to, these were not easy conversations. They were intense conversations. They were autopsies of what went wrong. What did we miss? What did you miss? How did this happen? In a system with so much progression and progress, how did your school or a part of your school fall backwards? And here's what I will tell you. I don't know how many meetings we had, but every single time the same statement was made, which is the principal knew it. At some point in that year, they knew it. They felt it, they saw it, they observed it, and one of two things happened. They waited too long to act, or they didn't act strong enough for a variety of reasons. They didn't feel they had the permission, they didn't feel they had something to make them act strong enough. If they waited too long, it's because we waited for mid-year data. We had a bad habit. We have a bad habit in the system of waiting for that data to inform our instruction and to inform our decisions. And so a number of the principals that we discussed, many of which are in the room right now, said as soon as I saw that mid-year data, I made a change. I moved a teacher, I departmentalized, I did something big. And we know, I think it's gonna come up, between when we look at mid-year data and when we take CMAS tests, the amount of instructional time is basically nothing. We waited too long as a system as well. That academics reorg, we worked on it all year, it was tough. Now we're ready, but it took us too long. So we had that conversation. In addition to those conversations, we've now visited every single one of those schools with the board president, walking classrooms. Again, meeting with the principal to say, here's what you told us a couple of weeks ago, here's the change we're already seeing in instruction, or here's the change we're not seeing. You'll hear about from others about the tighter cycles. What took us a quarter last year, we're now doing every single week. Can you go to the next slide, Dave, just as an example? Director Jorgensen, I believe you asked about, are we reviewing usage of curriculum and are we looking at data? This is not a real data set, so please don't respond to it. But this is now, we sat in this room, 11 of us yesterday, and we looked at this data set. We looked at what teachers, what classroom level and school level information, where are we using the tools that we've provided and where are we not? And if we're not using it, why? And who's going to that school in the next 48 hours to do something about it? If we're seeing already low overall passing or proficiency, what coach is going to that classroom right now? Not in a quarter, not at a semester, but right now. So the cycle of data, improve, reflect, all of that is the tightest I've ever seen. And so that is something I'm incredibly proud of. And like I said, we have been incredibly clear with every single school leader that we've discussed that any gap or any restriction that you felt like you had last year to not do what you needed to do does not exist. And if you feel like it exists, you call us and we do something about it immediately. You don't wait for another data set to tell you what you know is true. And so I think that's some really significant work that has happened over the last month that is unlike anything I have ever seen here in terms of how we're responding to data.
I'm gonna go back to the real-time adjustments, the micro adjustments, we're calling them, really to what Dr. Comfort was speaking to. We're gonna decrease the amount of time before we intervene, right? So a couple of great examples of micro adjustments in our system are daily exit tickets in our classrooms in Eureka and in CKLA, weekly topic assessments. We're not waiting 6 weeks for an end of unit assessment, right, to intervene. A great example of one of our schools and their action steps that was added as a result of the conversation with the superintendent is that if 80%, or excuse me, students scoring below 80% mastery automatically, immediately go into a win time group the next day for a reteach, right? So just decreasing, the biggest takeaway is we're decreasing the amount of time before we intervene. Quick data cycles will inform where our support and our attention need to be. Coaching cycles, agency, and the use of curriculum are the three main buckets that are focused on to guarantee access to high quality tier 1 instruction. We already talked about the micro adjustments a little bit ago to be responsive to the data to measure our effectiveness. The key is that we're not waiting. I want to echo it again what Dr. Comfort said, we are not waiting. We see a need, when a classroom says that we need help, when the data says that we need help in a space, we're coming to help and you can't opt out, right? That's the message that our system has to hear from us today. Teachers have been identified with an MGP of 40 or less. Support is being provided to them under the direction of the academic director, the academics team, area superintendents. We're not waiting to deploy supports to classrooms that show that they need it the most. That support includes coaching, training by a school embedded coach or an area instructional coach. And then we also have, and I'm about to turn it over to Dr. Fry, our model classrooms that we can send teachers to see excellence in action and understand this is the standard for what we expect of all of our classrooms in District 11.
We just continue to build on this idea that says within D11, we have these pockets of greatness. We saw it in the data that Dr. Kalki briefed on earlier. And as we continue to build this out, we want to grow our own talent pipelines. We want people to be learning in our own spaces. So as of last week, we've identified 7 model classrooms from that early adopter cohort that have been stamped by their academic director, their area superintendent, myself, their principal, folks who have been in those classrooms to say this is a space that we can incubate other talent coming into these spaces to learn from. I was in one of those spaces 2 weeks ago, and you could just, again, there's a feel in those spaces that we want people to experience, which is what are the moves happening that the coach walks alongside the teacher who's coming into that space to see what teacher actions are taking place. Part of our commitment in looking at this data is that support for our teachers below a 40 MGP. The other end of that, though, is teachers above the 80th. Who's in those classrooms? And so I made a commitment, and I've been walking those spaces, meeting with those teachers, and it's just really incredible to the question about what is happening at Chipeta. What's happening in our highest performing classrooms? I was with a 5th grade teacher at Scott last week, and what's happening in that space is the distance between what he is teaching, what he is measuring, and whether or not kids are getting it is almost instantaneous. What you could see in this classroom was he was monitoring student progress. The minute a kid missed it, they were going to the kidney table. He was writing an extra problem with a whiteboard on the table. The kids were solving it. He was coupling back. As soon as they got it, they were going back with their peers. But when they were stuck, he was again providing individual reteach. We weren't even waiting for an intervention block. We were in the moment making that kind of adjustment, and that's led him to an 84, 86 MGP consistent over years. Right? And so we have these spaces where we can take our own teachers and learn in these environments. And so the Model Classroom Initiative, like I said, began with these 7 that we could immediately stamp. We have a growing pipeline of what we consider emerging model classrooms, where teachers or principals have expressed an interest in becoming a model classroom, but we're working with additional coaching opportunities for those teachers. And then we have this pipeline in our early adopter cohort of 50 additional teachers who've committed to this accelerated training. So they're gonna give up a little bit of time in their classrooms with students to go to professional development that starts actually next week, where they'll be engaged in all-day professional development on kind of a fast cycle, where they'll go to professional development, they'll implement what they've got, they'll have a coach come into their space, monitor that implementation, provide real-time coaching, and within 3 months, we're hoping to scale what it took us last year, a full year to do.
For curriculum, we're making a lot of different adjustments. Obviously, some of it's new, but we've already started based on yesterday. So as an executive team, we looked at data, we looked to see how are the assessments being used, where are people scoring at already. Ended up reaching out to some principals and saying, hey, I noticed you didn't use this assessment. Equip, Eureka, for example, could be a really good option for your MGP classrooms, for example, and here's how that works. I'm happy to come over and show you how to do that. And so they immediately, responded and said, absolutely, I would love that. And so I think, again, to, Dr. Comfort's point, we are faster in our responses, and the data is allowing us to see where we potentially have skill gaps just in the understanding of leaders or teachers of what that might look like or what we might use those resources for. I'm noticing people reaching out sooner to say, hey, how do I find this assessment in Eureka, and proactively looking at, because they're seeing the needs in their building based on the data that they're already getting, because it is at the classroom level, which is something we haven't had before. We're already starting to switch from CKLA, for example, because what we noticed is we're giving a lot of end of unit assessments, which is great, but we really want to know, at 2 weeks, what's it looking like at 3 weeks, right? We want to be more proactive and stay on our toes instead of sitting on our heels. And so I'm already re-looking at scope and sequences and bringing in teachers to do some of that work with us to partner. I think another thing that is, agency, I hear a lot of people saying, I want to do agency, how do I do it more than just voice and choice? How do I use, the IE resources effectively? How do I get through all of the content? And so some of it is just leveraging, in Eureka, for example, in this lesson, you were trying to catch up time, so you did a worksheet, but Socratic Seminar was the very next thing you could have done. Socratic Seminar is agency. That gets, and it's a great assessment. Students are talking, you're hearing exactly what they know. Can they actually talk about the math concepts that they're discussing? A worksheet doesn't tell you that. And so part of that is really, again, so many people around this table have mentioned it, who's doing the lift? And how are we making learning visible? I think is becoming an important piece as well. Another thing, the math specific, so we obviously don't want our math where it is, we want it to be much higher. We've taken a couple different routes on that. One's through induction. When we do an induction program, CDE says you need these 10 things in order for, I totally made up 10, don't hold me to that. But you need these things in order for an induction program to be certified. We've ended up taking those, but then also building in rotations that new teachers will go through. So we have 4 different ones, and one of them is math. Because one of the things we're noticing, particularly for a lot of our newer teachers, is they don't actually know the math. And that makes sense to me. When I think about my own math, a lot of it was very procedural, right? We are now, our tests national, our curriculum, they're asking you to do conceptual as well. And so if I don't know that as a teacher, it's very hard to do that. So we've worked that into induction. We're also doing Mission Math Possible. So if you have less than 40 as a growth score, 3 through high school, we're looking to end up doing a variety of things of teaching the math, planning with you in depth, looking at assessments, how do you use the data. That will be for part of the district PD days, and then also looking to see how do we help support high schools with their late start Mondays and offer PD in there, either on site or even virtual office hours we've been being asked for. So those are some of the things we're doing. We're continuing to look and observe and see what's working and how do we continue to scale that.
There's just not a lot of time. I think I've said this, teaching is the hardest profession. Teaching kids that are behind is even harder. Teaching kids that are behind when there isn't a standardized curriculum or strategy and you're understaffed is nearly impossible. I think we've done incredible work as a district to redefine some of those foundational pieces. This is the year that we get to implementation with Fidelity. I'm on the record that says all the time, the problem is not Eureka. I'd be really happy at the end of the year to be able to eat those words because we implement Eureka with incredible fidelity, and then we find out that it's not delivering on the gains that we think that it can. Fundamentally, I think most of these curriculums are exactly the same, but we're trying to become a district where, yes, each individual school is different. Yes, each individual relationship between a student and a teacher is celebrated around that content. But we have to have some guardrails for us to be able to manage where it is that we can deploy those resources to make sure that we leave nothing to chance. Every child deserves access, guaranteed access to the highest quality instruction. Every child. Not how does every child get to Chipeta, not how do we double the size of Queen Palmer. We can't think singularly of the places that it's worked. We have to think at scale of how does it deliver for every child. This is not a District 11 problem. This is an American problem. We have to think differently about the profession of education. One of my favorite slides is when we talk about agency for students. And please come see this in action. Agency for students is when they are active in their own learning progression. We're trying to create a school district where educators are active in their own professional learning and growth. Everybody should have a growth plan, a training plan, an opportunity to be better than they were the day before. That is the goal of what we're trying to build. It's not been built anywhere. I know my style screams command and control. Please come to Executive Cabinet. Please come to the Power of 11. Please come do some of these walks with our embedded coaches of both district embedded coaches and academic directors and area instructional coaches on the area side to see that we've created a team of teams that will not leave this to chance. We can no longer say that by zip code is whether or not you are going to make it out of the socioeconomical status that your family has presented to you. I would venture to say that everyone around this table has exceeded the potential of what somebody thought about them when they were in elementary, middle, or high school, based upon our generation. I am incredibly afraid that we're the last generation that can say that. We have to completely, which we have, thank you for the reminder of the work we did last year, Dr. Comfort, restructure the entirety of what education is about that ensures that the child that needs the most gets access, not to just the average teacher salary, but to the best instructor within the system. You'll see those programs roll out this year. If you are hungry, we will create better opportunity for you. We're not gonna force people to move from one school to another. We want the people that are dying to make that difference. We've lost focus of our why. We're talking about losing an instructional day. We're talking about losing an instructional day. Shame on us that nobody is asking a third grader, how do you feel about losing a day to help you actually achieve the ability to read at grade level standard? I appreciate Ms. Huber's comment. Not Colorado, every state in the country does their school to prison pipeline based upon third grade reading scores. What is our answer to third graders on why it is that we might not teach for a day? It's a horrible position to sit as a leader of an organization that doesn't believe in the very vision, which is centered in the why of that vision. We are all here for children. We have to refocus. We have to be here for children. Anybody who does not want to be here for children, please come, I'll write you a great letter of reference. We'll get you where you need to go. That is not enough time to make up any of the flatness that we have. To be at 40% and 30%, again, I'm rounding up, giving myself that 39% and 31%. We have to be committed to what children need as a system. We will be implementing with fidelity. We will present to you, not just quarterly, we will present to you monthly updates. We will vary the topic that we will give you. Some of this will come from Dr. Carey's recommendations in the next brief. We will be on the mark that we spend now the 2 hours talking about academics and the 20 minutes talking about capital improvements. Not that the capital improvements aren't important, but we have to be a district that focuses and measures what matters. We have the data now. When I first got here, we talked about school level. The second year, we talked about growth, MGP, at the school or the grade level. We now have the classroom level data. Help us help the system to ensure that every child in that classroom gets access to high quality instruction. That's our goal, that's our mission, and we briefed this to you before. You'll see this coming to you in the UDIP when that comes. We're doing the USIPs first, that's what's coming next, September 17th and 24th, and then we'll close out. I appreciate the DAC who is already on top of many of those USIPs before we presented this tonight. Questions?
Okay, thank you. We'll turn it over to you for your comments and questions to wrap up this part of the conversation.
Are we gonna talk about slides 30 through 32 apparently? We have an extra slide in here now.
Are you talking about the appendix?
Yeah, I wonder if we're getting briefed on those.
Okay. Is there a specific question you have, Director Ott, about this?
I'm a little, I don't understand specifically the Summer Bridge slide, which is the last one. It talks about that it likely had a positive impact on slowing summer learning loss, melt, whatever, especially in ELA and reading. But when I look at it, this Summer Bridge drop in percent passing is higher than all elementary. And the 6-point gain in well below is higher than the 5-point gain in well below for all elementary. So the drops in percent passing and the gains in well below seem reverse for having a positive impact. So I wonder if they got reversed somehow. I don't also know if these two tables, which start spring, summer season, fall, is the fall 2025? Is this all 2025? Okay, and then are these the students that were in Summer Bridge, or are these the students who were overall, all elementary?
So they are all Summer Bridge, so
Okay.
it's a cohort. To Superintendent Gall mentioned that a full rework of Summer Bridge is in the process. This is an interesting question because it's kind of an, in research world, of alternate universe. You're asking a question of if a student didn't do Summer Bridge, would they be performing at that same level if they did? And the data just doesn't support being able to do that. So we get as close as we can with the cohort. So even though the trends and the metrics are in the wrong direction, absolutely, we're growing from the summer session, even from the, let's just go from spring to fall, the red grew with this group, the green shrunk. The question is, the ultimate question is, did that negative trajectory was it slowed? And that, it would appear, if we look at a group of, we didn't run a control group, that would actually be an interesting analysis as well, but stemming it or slowing down that rate is the notion that that was the advantage for this year's iteration of Summer Bridge. Did it reverse any trends? Absolutely not, it did not. Did it slow trends? Possibly.
But you see where I have an issue where I can't tell any of that necessarily. And I absolutely understand how useful a control group would have been, because without it, we can not make any assumptions here. Or we can make assumptions, but we have no data proof. And that's where my concern is here.
Yeah, we actually did run this with across the general population, and there was not a significant difference actually between the two. But to actually say, when I say control, I mean like matching on a particular factor. There wasn't the rigor like we did with the IE analysis. But when we look at the overall district trend compared to the Summer Bridge cohort trend, they were essentially the same, which then bolsters the claim that they probably helped stem that process. Without Summer Bridge, would those students in the lowest performance bands have dropped even more? That's really the question.
Okay, thank you. And to the point earlier of this information is generally publicly available, I understand all of that. It is, I pulled it up in CDE. But it would be nice if it were available to us as a board. That's where I was going with that question of, can we have this available to us and maybe even posted with this work session's data, because 7 of us having to go back and look at that massive file in CDE, and for me at least, I don't know if there's a more specific file just for District 11, but I'm scrolling to the top, which is this column, and scrolling back down, it's a lot of, it'd just be nice if we had it, 7 of us didn't have to go
We will post that
digging
for the
there.
board to review once we get through this evening's events, like to be able to.
And
Even
some of
tomorrow.
this
Thank you.
data was also coming in the last week to 10 days. So the school district has been processing all this information, and one of the reasons why some of this presentation was posted on Monday as opposed to last Friday was due to the last minute nature of some of this information coming from CDE. But the information will be shared as Superintendent Guo mentioned.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions, comments at this time from the board? I don't see any comments or questions from the board. I'm going to make more so some wrap-up comments on this. First, I appreciate all the principals being here. I know these are hard conversations. This is the time of the year when we have to, and Superintendent Gall talked about this, that in the next couple of weeks, your school improvement plans have to be reviewed by the board and then at a future board meeting adopted by the board. And it's not the most, it's some of the most difficult conversations to have in public when you have to dissect the performance of a school as to what transpired last year. I got an opportunity through Superintendent Call when I visited your school to engage with each one of you, and you provided a feedback as to what happens, which will be shared with the rest of the board when you come. But the level of rigor that was happening in your classrooms, and we popped into several of your classrooms as a surprise visit, and teachers were not aware of it, and seeing the scope and sequencing of the instruction that was happening and how from one classroom to another classroom there were consistency, and from one school to another school at the same grade level, the consistency that was taking place is something that I haven't observed in the past, and that reflects some of the work that is happening at the district level. As well, the feedback that superintendent has provided us. I also appreciate the fact that superintendent and his team have had that hard conversations with each one of you. And you are aware of the messaging that we are not going to wait until the middle of the year when it could be too late to synthesize that data and act on it. there is going to be tighter review and feedback cycles. And that 2 slides back, Superintendent Gall, the dates that you shared out there, if you can go back to, those dates are jarring. That, every day counts in the education of our child, and we cannot. No, I was looking at the 19, 22, 24. Yeah, that one. That's that every day counts in the education of our child, and we cannot lose one day of instructional education because that's a conversation that is taking place. I say this from a level of frustration because today I've had to engage with the media due to possibly losing an instructional day, and we cannot afford to lose one level of instructional day for our students if we need to achieve the board priority outcome that we got to improve student outcomes for every one of our children. So you guys understand the urgency at this point in time, and the superintendent has provided that same information to you. You have the supports and resources from the district, and if you need anything, you go through the proper chain, and if the board needs to provide that help and support, we are there to provide that help and support. The barriers that have existed in the past to some extent have been removed completely or has been minimized to a large extent. So the priority right now, Director Jorgensen talked about it at the very beginning, it is necessary that we cannot wait any longer. Director Jorgensen and I came on the board at the same time 6 years ago, and Director Art is going to be leaving the board in 3 months' time. So we've seen some of this, we've set the culture and the expectations of high expectations and no excuses in place. So this is the year we are going to, I strongly believe with the strategies in place, we are going to reap the fruits of our labor. So we look forward to reviewing the USIPs with you over the next couple of weeks, and thank you all for being here. Superintendent Gall, is there anything that you need to wrap up this conversation?
Just to affirm, I've never been prouder of the team at this table. This is a team that has come up with these ideas. Come see and watch what's happening in our classrooms. It is amazing. The data will always lag. We are a culturally different school district. For those of you who joined us at the start of the school year, you can palpably feel the energy that exists in the building. I don't want anybody to be confused on things that happen in the news. District 11 is the Colorado Springs School District 11. We're on the rise. We will make every one of those days count in spite of people who choose to not to. Can we eat dinner now?
We got one more topic. You can certainly.
In between, take a 5-minute break?
Well,
We're not done with the work session.
Oh,
is
sorry.
what he's
we'll
saying.
finish the work session and then we can take between the.
Okay, I will be really fast.
Yeah, we got one. And I see a couple of our other principals and assistant principals joining us as well. Thank you for being.
You're doing good PD work.
Awesome.
Good
Thanks
PD
for
work.
being here.
Okay, we have one other topic that is going to be on the agenda, and then we can take a break between the work session and executive session. This was, I'm going to actually, the topic agenda that we are going to be talking about is an assessment report and feedback. And Director Carey has done some work in collaboration with district admin, and he's going to provide a feedback to the board.
None of this will come as a surprise to my fellow board members because you've seen this language before. This is a summary of conversations that we've had now at 2 consecutive retreats, looking to increase both kind of the quality and the time that we spend holding administration accountable for results in instruction. So my context here is really more for the community because obviously you were all in these conversations. But we have 2 major things that we would like to do. One of which is increase the reliability, utilization of common formative assessments. And again, the goal here is not to increase administrative or teaching burden. The goal is to make sure that we're assessing in an intelligent way. And then also increase feedback loops between the board and administration. We talk all the time about how in the context of learning, right, you need those rapid feedback loops between student and teacher to make sure that the student is on pace with where they need to be and they're getting the help with the content as needed. And in much the same way, you know, we've talked in our retreats about increasing feedback loops between the board and administration. So the new language is below, where kind of in a similar format to what I wrote up when we were doing the EEG, I have 2 specific tasks that we would then provide to Superintendent Gall, and then I have a note for the board itself. The first task, and it sounds again like this is all work that is happening anyway, but I think it's useful for the board to kind of, you know, plant a flag and say, this is a high level expectation that we have for you. Ensure utilization of common formative assessments in the core content areas, again with the goal being comparison across the district and data informed decision making. And then task number 2 is a quarterly update on strategy and academic progress, including, if relevant, barriers to academic success and barriers to implementation of strategy in case the board needs to have some of those conversations. And again, the goal here is just kind of like Dr. Comfort said, the system is in the habit of waiting for mid-year data, updating at that point, at which point it's really too late to do anything at all. And so I'd like the board to explicitly task Superintendent Gall and the team with coming to us with updates more frequently than that. And then just a reminder for the board, this is a accountability update. This is not necessarily a time where we're going to totally relitigate strategy. It takes time for Mike to actually implement a strategy, ensure consistency across the whole system, and we can't really do that if we're constantly grabbing at the steering wheel every other meeting. So as a pairing of those 2 tasks, I would just ask that the board is disciplined when we hear these updates. This is an accountability piece. This is our chance to hear how things are going. It's a chance to put them in the room where they have to tell us how things are going. But it's not a time to relitigate strategy. We have times for those conversations throughout the year, but I would not recommend that we do it at these specific updates.
Thank you. So appreciate the work that you have done in this regard and providing a feedback, not only to the board, but as to the community. Any feedback from the board on this? If the board is, yes.
Just, can we find a different word than litigate? Because we are not engaging in legal proceedings here with the administration, and it just, that's what it sounds like we're gonna sue them or prosecute, whatever. It's really more about, you don't want us to, I think what you're saying is we shouldn't be debating the strategy.
Yeah,
okay.
Which is.
But litigating has really truly a different meaning.
I don't think he has used the word litigate in his report.
No, I did at the end.
Oh, you did?
Do you want me, are we okay with just changing that to not debate strategy?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, is the board by show of thumbs comfortable with the tasks that Director Gary?
George.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Appreciate your feedback. That gets us to again, appreciate all of you being here as well. I want to give a couple of quick updates to the board in the other source of information. Let me see my notes here so I don't forget what I need to talk about. See, there was a couple of things I wanted to provide and I'll give to you. Oh, Director Art talked about the energy audit discussions. You reached out to me, and the next step in the process, when is that going to come? That's scheduled to come at the next board session, which is September 17th, a week from today.
Thank you.
Just for the awareness of the entire board as well. Another follow-up I want to provide to the board. Yesterday, Chief Ottmer reached out to me and Director Hafley about the communications RFP, and those interviews happened this morning. Because it was a tight timeline, feedback that was required. I participated in it. Director Hafley was not available to participate this morning. We went through that interview process. It's still being, the information is being processed, and when a recommendation is available, it will come in front of the board at a future board meeting. That's all I have at this point in time for the board. Does the board have any other board members have anything that they want to bring to the table at this time? Seeing none, this board And we stayed true to our time.
Look at
Was
that.
that 2 hours that we
That was
scheduled?
2 hours.
Yes, and we are 3 minutes past the time, just like superintendent. We are adjourned at little past 6:05 p.m.
No, they're